And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is December the 16th, the 350th day of the year. Just 15 days remain to the year's over with, and we start a new one. Holidays and observances. National Chocolate Covered Anything Day. Indulge in a chocolate fountain or a fondue to dunk any treats you might fancy. Or drizzle your favorite dessert in chocolate sauce and syrup. Stupid Toy Day. From whoopee cushions to rubber chickens. National Barbie and Barney Backlash Day. Day of Reconciliation, marking the beginning of a new era in South Africa's history. Zagreb Advent, Hanukkah, which goes on till Monday, December 22nd. The Festival of Lights, time for family and delicious food and stories that remind us of hope's enduring glow in the darkest of times. Christmas Bird Count Week, Advent, Arctis Mundi, and of course, the one and only Blue Christmas. While most folks are at home opening presents, emergency workers are on duty, ensuring the safety of their communities over the holidays. And of course, famous people born on this date, Kristen Ritter. Well, let us see what stories we have in the news, because there's always something going on. Well, Rob Reiner's son, Nick's long struggle with addiction and volatility comes into focus after his parents' murders. From addiction struggles to violent outbursts, Rob and Michelle Reiner's son Nick has had his share of battles throughout the years. On Monday, the 32-year-old was arrested and booked on suspicion of murder in the homicide deaths of his parents, who were found dead in their Brentwood, California house December 14th. Initially booked on a $4 million bail, but records now show he's being held without bail. On Monday, he was transferred to the Twin Towers Correctional Facility. That's according to the L.A. County Sheriff's Department. Investigators believe Rob and Michelle suffered stab wounds, according to a law enforcement official who spoke on the condition of anonymity. This is not the first time their son's been violent, according to a neighbor. Well, the neighbor wouldn't go into detail. There was another incident a few years back with Nick. Nobody ever thought it would get to this point. Rob was always heartbroken his son couldn't beat his addiction, according to the neighbor. They wanted him to get help, go to rehab, but he wanted to get help while staying home. He didn't want to get treatment at a facility. And they've argued about that for years. Nick's had demons for the longest. It's been a nightmare. The whole thing's been a real tragedy. Another neighbor told Fox News that Nick had gone to rehab years ago and thought he was back to normal. Years ago when he was young, he was on heroin and cocaine, went to rehab and did well and was apparently back to normal, but obviously that wasn't the case. Hadn't been any stories about him recently. Well, 2015, Nick and Rob released a semi-autobiographical film titled Being Charlie, a movie loosely based on Nick's real-life experiences with addiction and recovery. He thought he was going to be a producer, like his father, but that didn't work out. Well, Brown University was a soft target for a shooter who remains at large, according to a criminal profiler. It offered a safe soft target to the psycho killer who opened fire during a weekend study session, according to a criminal profiler. He cited unsecured doors, limited cameras, and the fact the gunman still remains at large as of today. Unidentified gunman barged into a lecture hall at the campus in Providence, Rhode Island, about 4 in the afternoon, according to authorities. Started shooting, killed 2 students, and injured 9 more. College was a soft target, doors open, no security. And it was a gun-free zone. which meant that the shooter actually broke the law by having his gun. Gee whiz. Well, authorities have said there were few security cameras in the Bruce and Holly building where the shooting took place. The FBI released surveillance video showing a person of interest wearing dark clothes at an intersection to the northeast of the crime scene. Remains at large, and after police questioned but released somebody else in connection with the incident. I've seen the video. Ain't no way you can tell who that is. Well, ALC's luxury spending binge in Puerto Rico's reignited questions about the socialist brand. Peak hypocrisy. After dropping nearly $50,000 in Puerto Rico on luxury hotels and upscale dining and a venue rental where musical artist Bad Bunny was performing earlier this year, critics of ALC are questioning whether her socialist persona is more branding than belief, considering she's living like the elitist she claims to fight. According to White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, this isn't new for her. She's certainly been a hypocrite. Remember the dress she wore to that famous Met Gala where it said, tax the rich? Wasn't exactly something off the rack. It was a designer dress made just for her. Spicer slammed AOC and her other squad lawmakers who he's argued love to rally against capitalism, but certainly don't mind benefiting from it. These people don't know any bounds, he said. They love to tell everybody what they should do about their carbon footprint, and then they fly in private planes. They love to talk about the excesses of the rich, and then they benefit from it. They trade stock. They get rich in Congress. A lot of folks are just tired of the hypocrisy. Well, like Kirk shares an update after a private in-person meeting with Candace Owens. She announced Monday she had a productive conversation with Candace Owens, signaling a possible thaw in their rift following weeks of public tension in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination. Kirk shared the brief update in a statement on X and hinted that more details would become forthcoming. At the real Candace O, she said had a very productive conversation. More to come from both of us. Looking forward to AmFest this week. Time to get back to work. In a separate update on X, Candace Owens echoed the same message, saying the hours-long conversation involved more agreements than Owens had anticipated. We'll see what comes of it, if anything. Well, the Bondi Beach shooting suspect had bombs and ISIS flags and had recently traveled to the Philippines. The Australian authorities said Tuesday the father and son had opened fire on families during a Hanukkah event at Sydney's Bondi Beach. They had packed their vehicle with improvised explosive devices and homemade ISIS flags, and deepening fears that the massacre was part of a broader attack plan than initially believed. During a press conference, investigators called the father and son gunmen, ages 24 and 50, cowards who hunted Jewish Australians in broad daylight. 15 people were killed, more than 24 were injured in the shootings, which police are now formally describing as an ISIS-inspired terrorist attack. New South Wales police confirmed the younger attacker's vehicle contained IEDs and 2 homemade ISIS flags. Evidence authorities said points directly to extremist inspiration and an apparent intent to carry out a larger coordinated assault. Forensic teams are still conducting ballistic and chemical examinations of the items. According to Australia's Federal Police Commissioner, Chrissy Barrett, this was a barbaric attack against Jewish Australians, hunted down in broad daylight. Authorities said they're still working to determine whether the devices were functional or intended for secondary targets. A JetBlue pilot calls Air Force near-miss outrageous after a tanker crosses the flight path. JetBlue plane narrowly avoided a mid-air collision with a U.S. Air Force jet near Venezuela on Friday, an incident which the pilot described as outrageous. JetBlue Flight 1112, an Airbus A320 en route to New York from the Caribbean nation of Curacao, was roughly 20 minutes into its flight when it encountered a U.S. Air Force tanker north of that country. Tanker reportedly flew directly into JetBlue's flight path, prompting the passenger plane to take evasive action to maintain separation with a tanker aircraft. That's according to the Aviation Safety Network. According to a recording captured by liveatc.net, JetBlue pilot called the incident outrageous, noting that the military aircraft did have a operating transponder. That's an electronic device that allows air traffic control to track an aircraft accurately. Without it, that aircraft couldn't be detected on radar. They passed directly into our flight path, the pilot said. Didn't have their transponder turned on. It's outrageous. Well, that could easily have been a major disaster. Well, Ilhan Omar lashes out at Sikh Republicans for investigating her alleged marriage to her brother. She's called those concerns about whether she married her brother Sikh after the far-left lawmaker was approached by Fox News about the border czar Tom Homan signaling that the federal officials have started digging into records pertaining to the matter. Homan said last week that records and files related to Omar's potential immigration fraud were being pulled and looked at after President Trump revived the years-old scandal amid an ongoing debate over the Somali Medicaid fraud scandal taking place in Omar's state of Minnesota. While Homan suggested the fraud likely took place, he also signaled the crime statute of limitations could present a problem when it comes to prosecuting Omar for any potential violations. Well, she married her brother. It's going to raise some interesting questions. Well, President Trump can turn the table on the left with a radical tax plan, according to experts. He loves a good foil. For America's sake, he should find his next one in Illinois. Cook County, home of Chicago, and most of the state's leftist lunacy is taking the nation's furthest step toward a so-called universal basic income. Going forward, a lot of low-income residents in Chicago will permanently get the monthly checks of $500. The goal is to help the poor stay on their feet, but in reality, the poor will stay poor and get more numerous. Not only should the president call out this injustice, but he should contrast it with his recent call to eliminate income tax altogether. That may be Trump's greatest opportunity for moral and economic leadership yet. You know, if we didn't have income tax, which was actually a temporary tax put into effect during World War I to pay for the war, but what government has ever seen a unlimited pot of money and let it go? Well, ghost ships that are carrying illicit oil have sailed into President Trump's crosshairs. After the U.S. seized a tanker carrying Venezuelan crude oil, the shadowy fleet of ghost ships used to evade sanctions drifted squarely into President Trump's crosshairs. On December 10th, he announced the seizure of the Skipper, a vessel that secretly ferries oil in defiance of sanctions. The broader fleet, a clandestine armada of roughly 1,000 tankers, quietly evades and navigates global sea routes to move oil from sanctioned countries like Russia and Iran and Venezuela. So-called ghost ships sail under foreign flags to obscure their origins, repeatedly change names, shift ownership through shell companies, disable transponders to evade tracking, and conduct mid-sea transfers to mask their cargo. Results a labyrinthine system of handoff and disguised vessels. Well, I don't think it'll ever be completely stamped out. President Trump again says he's considering reclassifying marijuana as a less dangerous drug. He says he's looking at that very strongly. He said he's weighing whether to reclassify marijuana as I say, a less dangerous drug. And that statement mirrors similar comments he made earlier this year and during his 2024 campaign, presidential campaign. Speaking to reporters in the Oval Office, he said he was considering an executive order to reclassify marijuana as a Schedule III drug. A lot of people want to see it, this reclassification, because it leads to tremendous amounts of research that can't be done unless you reclassify it. So that is definitely on the horizon. Well, Brian Glenn's revealed he's engaged Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. According to him, she said yes. Real America's Voice Chief White House correspondent Brian Glenn and outgoing Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia revealed they've gotten engaged. He did a post on X where she said yes, adding the ring emoji while sharing a photo of himself with the Congresswoman. Greene shared Glenn's post and wrote happily ever after along with a red heart emoji. Well, according to Republican Representative Warren Davidson of Ohio, he replied with congratulations. Representative Tim Burchett of Texas shared Glenn's post and wrote, congratulations, I can perform the ceremony in Tennessee for free. Well, both of them are probably millionaires by this point, but don't turn down a free wedding. After President Trump trashed Greene on Truth Social last month, suggested he would back a primary challenger, the lawmaker announced she'd resign from office, noting her last day is going to be January the 5th. Well, President Trump has filed a powerhouse $10 billion lawsuit against the BBC over documentary editing of his January 6th remarks. He's the first president to actually take the media to task for some of their silliness. He's filed a monster $10 billion lawsuit on Monday against the British Broadcasting Corporation for its 2024 Panorama documentary that distorted his January 6th remarks. He sued the BBC for both defamation and for a violation of Florida's Deceptive and Unfair Trade Practices Act for $5 billion apiece, as the president seeking a total of $10 billion. This suit, filed in the Southern District of Florida Federal Court, was filed in a personal capacity and names the BBC and the BBC Studios productions as defendants. The formerly respected, now disgraced BBC defamed President Trump by intentionally and maliciously and deceptively doctoring his speech in a brazen attempt to interfere in the 2024 presidential election. BBC has a long pattern of deceiving its audience in coverage of President Trump, all in service of its own leftist political agenda. President Trump's lawsuit is holding the BBC accountable for its defamation and reckless election interference, just as he's held other fake news mainstream media responsible for their wrongdoing, according to a spokesperson. President Trump's represented by attorneys Alejandro Brito, Edward Palzek, and Daniel Epstein. BBC's come under intense scrutiny over the documentary about Trump's January 6, 2021 speech delivered before the riot at the U.S. Capitol. Critics claim that documentary is wildly misleading because it omitted Trump's call for supporters to protest peacefully. It made it look like he was calling for a revolt. Well, Minnesota residents have slammed Governor Walz, state oversight, after $250 million Feeding Our Future fraud. Minneapolis residents speaking with Fox News were largely critical of the state government's handling of the massive fraud crisis that's caused plunging confidence in Democratic Governor Tim Walz and put a new spotlight on the state's Somali community. The $250 million Feeding Our Future fraud scheme involved alleged perpetrators, many of them Somalis, targeting a children's nutrition program that Minnesota oversaw during the COVID-19 pandemic. A man by the name of Peter, a law-flying Minnesota resident, told Fox News he felt governance in that state had gotten worse. He said, no disrespect to the people running it, but, well, maybe a little bit, but I feel like they just don't care about the little people. They don't care about the government. They don't care about the people that are below them. They don't care about the taxpayers. They only care about how much money they can put in their pockets. And certainly that is the case with a lot of federal programs. Well, according to Jesse Waters, Primetime, Providence, Rhode Island's losing confidence in its leadership over the Brown shooting probe. They have no idea who this individual is, no way really to find him. Well, Nancy Pelosi suggests that Trump has no reason to be impeached a third time if Democrats retake the House. They just had the Al Green attempt shut down by Congress. She said there's not enough cause to impeach President Trump a third time. During an interview with USA Today's Susan Page, Pelosi was asked whether the Democratic Party ought to consider impeaching Trump again if they retake the House in 2026. She said the person most responsible for impeaching President Trump when I was Speaker was President Trump. He gave us no choice. He crossed the line, and his telephone call with President Zelensky is one manifestation of his disrespect of the Constitution. Is jeopardizing the sanctity of our own elections in our country and all the rest. That's coming from a woman who has made $400 million while representing this country, supposedly putting the taxpayers first. Well, Chicago lost its mind financially under Mayor Brandon Johnson, according to the Washington Post. The editorial board of the Post called out Mayor Brandon Johnson on Monday, arguing he's mismanaged Chicago to the point the city has financially lost its mind. The board argued that Chicago has an extensive history of using short-term economic gimmicks, and Johnson and his allies are doing more of the same. The board said Chicago's net operating budget increased almost 40% between 2019 and 2025, which, according to Grant McClintock of the Civic Federation, was subsidized in large part by temporary federal pandemic funding that kept the city financially afloat. He said, though, times have changed in 2025, but all Brandon seems to be doing is looking for other ways to put money in his pocket. Well, the doctor mysteriously found dead bodies. No, excuse me, the doctor was found dead inside a Dollar Tree freezer, reportedly naked. Female doctors mysteriously found dead and naked inside a freezer at a Dollar Tree store in Miami, Florida on Sunday. An employee at the discount store's Little Havana location reported discovering a deceased woman inside the business during operating hours. Found her at 8 in the morning, according to the Miami Police Department. The woman was identified as 32-year-old Helen Michelle Garay Sanchez. She was located inside a walk-in freezer, located in the store stockroom, according to Public Information Officer Michael Vega. Sanchez was also naked when she was discovered, according to CBS News. The complainant found a naked female in a cooler in the store, dispatches were heard saying over the police scanners. Authorities added that surveillance footage indicated no foul play was involved. Investigation remains ongoing. According to a GoFundMe page, Sanchez was an anesthesiologist specializing in congenital heart disease and was originally from Nicaragua. Her friends and family now working to have her body returned to her home country where her 2 children live. Well, with that story, we're going to turn to our main topic for today. We know we've had some interesting topics over the last few shows. You know, there's been a lot of stories about UFOs and aliens, both in the news and on a lot of podcasts. And I've written a number of books about UFOs. My favorite one's Beyond Roswell, where I talk about crashes that the government really doesn't want to discuss. But there's been talk that there's been alien retaliation for captured ETs. You know, in several of the stories about crashed UFOs, there's been discussions of alien bodies being found. Well, on a August night in 2019, hydrophones anchored 3 miles deep in the Mariana Trench recorded a pulse unlike any known whale song or seismic groan. And that pattern repeated every 43 minutes, modulating as if somebody twisted a dial in anger. Within hours, an unmarked submersible from a Pacific Fleet base slid above the coordinates, dropping sleek drones into the water. 3 days later, the pulse stopped. The coastal villagers hundreds of miles away began finding silver fish washed ashore. Their scales melted as though boiled from within. Oceanographers whispered a word that had not been used that much since the Cold War. Retribution. For decades, rumors have placed extraterrestrial holding pens under desert mesas in Nevada, limestone caverns in Missouri, and volcanic tunnels beneath the Azores. Witnesses described cylindrical glass cells bathed in violet light, where slender beings float sedated in nutrient suspension. These guardians wear no rank, but answered a tri-letter directorate buried deeper still. Officially, these captives are biological specimens for defensive research. Unofficially, they're referred to as bargaining chips, cosmic insurance policy kept in shackles and silence. In June of 2022, ufologist Dr. Stephen Greer held a closed-door briefing for journalists who signed non-disclosure agreements thicker than phone books. Greer claimed to possess transcripts of intercepted transmissions from non-human intelligences addressed to U.S. military command. According to a translation, it said, "Return those who were taken in vivisection. Let the ocean rest or the ocean's going to rise." Well, the phrase became a meme in conspiracy boards. Let the ocean rest. Followers argued the message foreshadowed coastal disasters carefully tuned to punish or not annihilate the human population. In the lore of alien retaliation, two installations loom larger than Area 51. The first is called Moonlight Ridge. Supposedly, it's beneath White Sands Missile Range, which is not that far from here, where captured craft are reverse-engineered in hangars lit by sodium lights that discolor flesh. And the second one is called Granite Deep. Burrows under the Continental Divide. Its labs rumored to vivisect entities nicknamed aquatics, beings with gill slits and glassy eyes adapted to high-pressure oceans on distant moons. Both facilities share one architectural dogma: layers of water jackets shielding operations from all-planet surveillance. It's the water, believers insist, through which the retaliation now flows. Now, not all prisoners breathe our air. Stories circulate of Room 39 Blue, an aquarium-like sphere where an ivory-skinned creature hovers in brine, limbs folded like origami. Techs drape their instruments in lead foil, fearing the thing's mind can detonate pacemakers. When interrogators pump an audio barrage of pulse with tones, its pupils shattered into hexagons. Each session ends with technicians vomiting, their inner ears ruptured by infrasound feedback. The being survives. The men grow deaf, and outside sonar buoys detect spike waves dancing on that same hexagonal rhythm. Proof, according to theorists, that the captives can hear its cries and map their vengeance accordingly. Well, islanders in Palu keep a folk tale of the singing coral, reefs that glow and great spirits travel beneath them. 2021, entire coral heads fluoresced blood red, then bleached overnight, emitting a faint oscillation heard on dive recorders. Elders interpreted the omen. The sea mourns for a warrior kidnapped by land dwarfs. 2 months later, a typhoon swerved 90 degrees to strike a U.S. listening station on Guam, toppling radar dishes like dominoes. Meteorologists called it chance. The coral singers, believers claim, called it justice. Alien retaliation, according to this theory, is strategic rather than apocalyptic, favoring precision strikes that erode infrastructures and morale without instigating full nuclear exchange. According to analysts, there are 5 vectors: hydroacoustic sabotage, triggering harmonic resonances that fracture deep-sea cables and severing data arteries; biosignature blight, seeding marine pathogens that target farm fish, undermining protein supplies; pulse line quakes, those are micro-earthquakes induced along continental shelves, collapsing undersea mining rigs; magnetic lens flares, distorting local magnetospheres to fry satellite constellations, blinding militaries; and ice pulse floods, accelerating glacial carving at key fjords to raise sea level centimeters at a time, drowning missile silos hidden in the river deltas. Each act communicates capability while withholding catastrophic overkill. Reminder that the captives breathe behind the steel only so long as oceans stay merciful. Inside Granite Deep, a division nicknamed Caretakers manages prisoner welfare, ostensibly to keep specimens viable. Members speak of the gray zone, a moral borderland where empathy becomes a security risk. One anecdote tells of a nurse who removed her ear protection to soothe a weeping algae-skinned juvenile. Next shift found her catatonic, repeating a phrase in a language like whale clicks. Child watched, eyes luminous, till guards flooded the cell with amnestic gas. The nurse recovered, but dreams forever, curtains made out of salt. Well, months before the Mariana Pulse, sailors in an Ohio-class submarine reported phosphorescent glyphs spiraling up the hull, glowing where barnacles once clung. The pattern, when translated, and by whom official channels never says, is the count is 3. Conspiracy theorists link it to missing prisoners. If 3 beings languish in tanks, then 3 surges will scour the coastlines. Governments hired divers to scrape the phosphor. The glyphs returned brighter on ballistic submarines 3 weeks later. Surface crews began painting hulls with ablative black, hiding messages that refused to stay silent. In early 2023, an oil platform west of Sumatra recorded a sonar anomalies, a column of bubbles rising from 4,000 meters deep. Minutes later, the drilling bit sheared, despite tranquil seas. Workers felt the rig shudder as if slapped by a whale, double its size. Video footage shows a shadow passing under lattice steel. Frames glitch as magnetic field spike. Insurance investigators blamed hydrate destabilization. Offshore Shadow, though, called it an alien knuckle knock, a warning to stop tapping what lies beneath. Academic seismographs captured a signature nicknamed Event X9, twin P waves with no S wave pair, implying an implosive, not explosive, source near Tonga Trench. The frequency matched lab recordings of a distressed aquatic entities at Granite Deep. If prisoners emit rescue beacons coded into seismic harmonics, and Event X9 reads as an SOS ping, and the ocean replied with a volcanic eruption weeks later, sending ash clouds at grounded Pacific flights. So you have to ask yourself, was this eruption neutral or a retaliatory distraction allowing undersea forces to reposition? The data draws shapes only fear can finish. Well, alien strategists, according to narratives, practice proportionality. One captive equals one calamity. Humanity's survival depends on bargaining bodies for calm seas. This doctrine turns prisons into weather vanes. The moment storm seasons lengthen, watchers ask which specimen was probed that month. A quiet wink at Moonlight Ridge can precede tranquil tides. of vivisection at Granite Deep might birth a rogue wave that slams tourist beaches overnight, killing nobody but terrifying millions. A slap, not a sword, urging release. Well, naval architects dread the Zeinflaw salt line, the depth at which steel fatigues faster than sensors detect cracking. Rumors claim extraterrestrials exploit the salt line, sending pressure pulses that resonate only at mortal depth, rupturing hulls silently. When the research ship Aegir imploded south of New Zealand in 2024, salvage crew found no impact scars, just seams peeled like petals, as though the ocean had chosen a bloom to open. Families sued, the Navy sealed testimony. Conspiracy forums tallied yet another tick on the vengeance scoreboard. Behind closed doors, legislatures discussed the Covenant, hypothetical treaty scenario where Earth surrenders hostages in exchange for technology or amnesty. Leaks describe 2 non-negotiable alien demands. Number 1, return all living captives within 1 lunar cycle. And number 2, decontamination and abandonment of detention sites, followed by sea-level sanctified rights. Negotiators balk. Generals warn that releasing specimens forfeit strategic parity. Meanwhile, coastal insurance premiums skyrocket, quietly acknowledging a war already underway, fought in flood maps and port statistics. Climatologists plot an uptick in rogue tides, isolated surges unlinked to storms. Graphs resembled a choir score, waves rising like voices in staggered crescendos. Map the incidents against rumored interrogation dates, and the lines converge. Are prisoners singing, oceans answering? Fishermen off Chile claim to hear distant hums underneath still water, like stadium crowds roaring from chasms. They pull nets up empty, not from scarcity, but as if the fish chose deeper realms, obeying a summons older than nets in need. Speculative engineers envision alien tools for oceanic warfare. First one is graviton shears, devices that thin water's inertia, letting tsunamis travel further with less energy. Thermocline mirrors, fields that reflect sound, blinding solar arrays while guiding cetacean pods as living battering rams. Silt blight, microbes that liquefy continental shelf sediment, inducing underwater landslides beneath coastal defenses, and luminal arcs. These are bioluminescent craft camouflaged as plankton blooms, slipping past naval blockades unnoticed. Now, none of these marvels are actually seeking genocide. They all point to a single objective: retrieve the stolen, punish the thieves, and spare the innocent where possible. Where medical journals quietly index ocean PTSD as syndrome among sailors stationed near captivity bases. Symptoms include vivid dreams of drowning in starlit voids, aversion to running water, and an incessant ringing in the ear, matching the 43-minute Mariana pulse. Therapists can't untangle whether exposure to classified sonar or emphatic bleed from captive minds triggers the malady. Either way, discharge rates climb and recruitment falters. Paranoia whispers that every mind at sea is now a battlefield. Well, space agencies track a cluster of objects parked at the Earth-Moon Lagrange 2, each emitting microwave scans into our ocean. Publicly cataloged as debris, the objects exhibit course corrections too precise for junk. Amateur astronomers dub them sentinels. If captives serve as homing beacons, sentinels listen, triangulating. Should humanity relocate prisoners or deepen the cages, sentinels adjust resonances, orchestrating a new lesson in hydrological terror. Cosmos now becomes a chessboard of silent watchers and drowning pawns. In late 2024, global tidal gauges dipped uniformly by 2 millimeters. That's a statistical impossibility without massive ice melt. The anomaly lasted for 6 hours. Beachcombers found shorelines earlier wide, seaweed sizzling as if microwaved. Then the water came back, erasing footprints before sunrise. Oceanographers blamed barometric quirks. Conspiracy scholars labored at the breath in, a rehearsal for a larger exhale meant to remind land dwellers their borders are drawn by water hands. All timelines in alien retaliation literature aim toward a threshold called the zenith, the moment oceans reclaim enough land to force capitulation. Some place zenith in 2027. Others warn each interrogation of a captive accelerates the date. Governments respond with levees and breakwaters and orbital lasers pitched as meteor deterrents. But budgets betray desperation. For every dollar spent on defense, another funds black site laboratories probing writhing shapes behind glass, hoping one more biopsy yields a weapon to silence the sea itself. It's a spiral of hubris. The more cuts inflicted on prisoners, the more waves rise, tightening a ring of foam around continents until nations have to decide. Keys or coffins. And somewhere in a tank lit violent and cold, an eye opens, reflecting a world that thought cages could master cosmos. The pupil contracts, distant sirens wail as buoy alarms flash red. And into that narrowing iris swims one eye reflection, tiny, trembling, waiting to learn whether mercy survives beyond the stars or whether we taught it silence with scalpel strokes. Well, there's been a lot of stories about alien bodies being found at crash sites. Of course, they've all been miscounted as dummies that fell out of weather balloons. Everything comes back to weather balloon. Well, now we're going to talk about what's been referred to as the Great Wealth Transfer hoax. You know, every evening markets close on green numbers, pundits toast record highs, and pension funds breathe easy. But there's actually a different set of books that can be found behind velvet doors, an invisible ledger where the line items are forests, aquifers, and centuries-old family estates. On this shadow ballot sheet, zeros migrate like migrating geese, leaving the public ballots hollower than a scarecrow's chest. Conspiracy contends that the loud carnival of stock tickers distracts from the silent heist. True wealth, land and water and minerals and generational legacies, slides hand over hand into billionaire vaults while the crowds chase pixelated coins on glowing screens. For most citizens, wealth arrives as digits, salary deposits, crypto balances, brokerage apps disguised as games. The screen expands, the real estate beneath our feet contracts. Comparators describe a hologram economy where number wealth inflates like carnival glass, while resource wealth concentrates like mercury droplets. When the music stops, hyperinflation, grid failure, systematic debt implosion, the hologram shatters, and only resources remain. And it's at that point, believers say, that ordinary people discover they hold claims on nothing but evaporated promises. Well, the theory actually divides modern assets into three nested shells. The shell of mirage, that's fiat currency, equities, crypto, derivatives, infinitely reproducible, emotionally addictive, and easily frozen by decree. Then there's the shell of control, infrastructure, data centers, satellites, not only public yet effectively privatized through concession contracts. And the shell of essence, that's land and water and soil microbes and seed genomes and rare earth seams, finite, life anchoring, and quietly changing hands. Well, the hoax operates by herding the public into shell number one, coaching institutions into shell number two, and reserving shell number three for the architects of the game. Well, mass media in this narrative functions as a smoke curtain, so to speak. Headlines dazzle with celebrity divorces and sports trades and political gaffes. Dramas engineered to keep eyes off county recorder deed logs. While talk show guests borrow with culture war skirmishes, escrow officers file quick claim deeds that shift river-fed ranches to untouchable LLCs domiciled in zero tax havens. And news anchors move on. The sorrow doesn't. Economists occasionally whisper about asset hollowing, inflated valuations masking declining utility. A suburban house may double in price but rot beneath synthetic stucco. A currency may rally while grain silos empty out. Conspiracy claims asset hollowing is not a glitch but a calibrated siphon. Raise sticker prices, dangle paper gains, and the owners are remortgage and refinance and resell. Predatory funds armed with cheap credit then swoop, vacuum intangible assets while leaving previous owners bragging over phantom profits that melt when currencies convulse. Well, corporations double as paper kingdoms, legal persons absorbing liabilities so flesh and blood elites remain unscathed. When the paper kingdom collapses through bankruptcy, lawsuit, or environmental fines, the crown princes have already relocated their treasure into fresh shells. Employees clutch severance checks like passports to nowhere. Executives stroll new hallways lined with abstract art. The great transfer resembles a snake shedding its skin, each husk abandoned to creditors while the living coil slithers onward. Cryptocurrency and standard lore liberates the populace from central banks. This hoax narrative twists the tailor. Digital coins serve as digital alchemy, transmuting electricity into belief. Early whales cash out, purchasing vineyards and timberlands. Late adopters chase skyrockets, convinced they will also exit rich. When exchange gateways freeze, whether by regulation, hack, or liquidity drought, coins revert to code. Fields and forests, meanwhile, stay rooted beneath the feet of the few who time the trick. Well, data analytics reveals stealth acquisitions by conglomerates camouflaged through thousand-eyed LLC networks. Each eye owns a sliver, a dairy farm here, a mountain spring there. Stitch the slivers together and you conjure up a leviathan controlling supply chains from seed to shelf. Private equity funds buy trailer parks, raise rents, and force sales. Residents exit with campers hitched and equity gone. Commercial farmland flips from multi-generational families to pension fund portfolios hedging inflation. The earth itself actually becomes a bond coupon. Satellite imagery maps resource corridors. Conveyor belts of rail and river and fiber optic linking mines to ports and farms to mills. Investors vying for these choke points hide behind sovereign wealth fronts. Once a corridor falls under consolidated title, commerce within bends to a single toll booth. You control the corridor. You tax every ton of grain, every kilowatt, every scrolling tweet. Historians liken it to medieval baronies charging bridge tolls. Economists call it rent extraction at continental scale. Embedded in Conspiracy Podcast, takes an imaginary device, the currency collapse clock. Each new trillion in public debt advances the minute hand. At midnight, hyperinflation erupts, erasing savings dominated in shell one digits. Speculators purchase paintings in gold and heirloom seed banks, artifacts immune to paper files. Government stimulus douses markets and liquidity, delaying midnight but soaking fuse cords laid beneath future budgets. Midnight postponed is not midnight canceled. That's according to the timekeepers. The clock only has one direction. Official statistics trumpet rising household net worth. Strip out the real estate leverage and student loan forbearance and subsidized mortgages, and net worth deflates like a breached dirigible. The conspiracy calls published metrics a false prophecy index. Beanstalk numbers that climb skyward while the roots wither. By the time metrics correct, ownership of life-critical assets is migrated to fortified trust whose beneficiaries sip wine behind biometric gates. In other words, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. The middle class, once the ballast against social upheaval, shrinks into a hollow column. Tax codes reward assets. Inflation. Wages limp behind. Families borrow against homes to fund universities whose degrees chase jobs that vanished in algorithmic consolidation. Each debt swap chisels at independence. In conspiratorial diagrams, the middle class resembles a river drained to expose gold. First the water siphoned out, then the prospectors that claim the gleaming bedrock beneath. Well, there are 5 gears that are said to drive the wealth conveyor. First is financial repression. Interest rates trail inflation. Savers bleed purchasing power. Shadow inflation. Goods shrink in quantity, grow in price. Official indexes exclude shrinkflation. Regulatory moats, compliance costs cripple small firms, paving lanes for mega corporations. And a monopoly clouds number 4, digital platform, centralized markets, skimming percentage fees on every sale. And as crisis oscillations, emergencies justify bailouts that socialize risk, privatize reward. And together these gears rotate, ratcheting resources upward like grain into a silo the public never sees. Parallel to the transfer, rumors talk about lifeboat communities, remote compounds where elites install geothermal grids and aquaponic domes and drone-defended perimeters. Membership requires investing in shared holding companies that own adjacent farmland. And in the event of social fracture, residents retreat behind chain link laced with iris scanners. They'll farm and print replacement parts on metallurgical 3D printers and governed by shareholder charter. The Hoax predicts a future where nations persist on maps, but sovereignty migrates to these visa-free enclaves. According to the architects, true security lies in legacy vaults, repositories of manuscripts and heirloom seeds and art older than printing presses. Some vaults embedded in limestone ridges, others hide in decommissioned missile silos stabilized for millennia-scale humidity. Contents can reboot civilization or ransom culture back to a desperate public. Rumor claims trustees plan timed releases, auctioning Renaissance paintings piece by piece when currencies hyperinflate, using proceeds to scoop up yet untouched forests, completing the spiral. When a town exhausts its taxable base, property taxes skyrocket. Water mains rupture, schools merge, crime creeps. Funds that purchased municipal bonds decades prior buy foreclosure bundles at pennies and then petition for rezoning into private reserves. Residents become tenants on ancestral streets, and those who can't pay relocate. Those who stay sign leases, converting home ownership into permanent renters. Citizenship without stake, voices without weight. Critics ask how such an operation avoids a revolt. Well, conspirators point to controlled chaos, intermittent crises, and we've seen a lot of that. Pandemics, cyber attacks, supply chain snarls, absorb public outrage, channeling energy into partisan blame games instead of structural analysis. Anger seeks culprits who can fit onto protest placards. LLC networks have no faces, no statues to topple. They glide beneath the radar until anger burns out, leaving a legal title unchanged. Well, streaming services premiere dystopian dramas depicting billionaire bunkers, satirizing precisely the world being built. Laughter diffuses dread. Viewers binge apocalypses between grocery deliveries and micro trades on meme stocks. Satire becomes skeletal truth masquerading in clown paint while mocking a foreshadowed future. Culture anesthetizes itself against mobilization. Well, the wealth transfer literature sketches three horizons. There's the soft reset. Currency debases gradually. Pensions dwindle. A two-tier society ossifies, but overt revolution never ignites. There's a flashpoint snap. Hyperinflation detonates overnight. Social contracts rupture. Lifeboat enclaves seal the gates, leaving city cores to barter economies. And there's the stewardship gamble. Elites unveil a feudal tech hybrid, basic income for loyalty. We're seeing that in Chicago. AI curated stability in exchange for property surrender. Citizens accept digital serfdom over famine. All scenarios converge into one premise. Ownership, once diffused, coalesces. Whether the masses suffer gracefully or burn the edifice depends on variables the architect model but can't wholly control. A century from now, archivists may unearth ledgers tallied in soil footprints rather than bank logos. They'll wonder how citizens watch fortunes migrate like migrating birds, cheering the spectacle, tweeting hashtags, never grasping the silence where their equity once nested. The echo left in empty vaults is going to answer. The hoax succeeded because it never called itself a theft, only a trend, a cycle, maybe a transfer. And the trends, like tides, inspire neither lawsuit nor rebellion. They merely happen while watchers selfie the flood. Well, for now, city skylines glow. Mortgages auto-debit. Memes distract. The conveyor belt hums beneath floorboards few think to lift. And somewhere on that belt, the deed of tomorrow slides toward hands already poised to sign. Well, from that, let's talk about something called SV40, said to be the cancer seed in the sugar cube. In the spring of 1955, America cheered a medical miracle. Jonas Salk's injectable polio vaccine turned a sum of terror into a conquerable foe. Mothers wept with relief. Civic leaders staged public inoculations. Newspapers hailed the dawn of virus-free childhood. Well, hidden beneath that jubilation, though, was a microscopic hitchhiker. It lurked in countless vials of vaccine. Simian virus 40, or SV40 for short. Paloma virus, a native to rhesus macaques used in vaccine culture. For 800 years, the stowaway rode sugar cubes and syringes into the bloodstreams of millions. Campaign banished polio's iron lungs, but according to conspiracy theorists, seeded a quiet epidemic whose harvest would ripen decades later as tumors blossoming in lungs and brains and bones. Vaccine manufacturers in the 1950s cultivated poliovirus on kidney tissue sliced from Asian macaques. Kidney cells multiplied obediently. They also played host to resident viruses harmless to monkeys but untested in humans. SV40, discovered only in 1960, 5 years after mass inoculation began, proved adept at slipping past quality checks. Its name simply marked the order of discovery, the 40th simian virus identified. By the time scientists recognized the stowaway, entire birth cohorts had swallowed or been jabbed with live SV40 hitchhikers. SV40 is a circular double-stranded DNA virus cloaked in a icosahedral shell. At its genetic core lies the large T antigen protein that hijacks cell machinery, pushing resting cells to replicate DNA, fertile ground for both viral copies and potential mutations. In lab rats, SV40 triggers aggressive sarcomas. Transplanted into human fibroblast in vitro, it immortalizes the cells, a stepping stone toward malignancy. The virus is small, it's silent, and exquisitely suited to relight cellular fates. From the late 1954 to early 1963, estimates suggest 90 to 100 million Americans got one or more SV40 tainted doses. Global figures climb higher. Eastern Bloc nations, Asia, parts of Africa all accepted surplus U.S. vaccine stock. Some lots carried attenuated polio virus. Others housed a live virus. In both, SV40 hitchhiked. Regulatory agencies, blind to a threat they hadn't yet named, issued no recalls, no warnings. 1960, Dr. Bernice Eddy inoculated hamsters with a standard polio vaccine batch. Within weeks, the animals sprouted kidney tumors. Eddy warned superiors her report was shelved. Months afterwards, Dr. Sweet and Hillman isolated SV40 from the same seed stocks, confirming a cross-species contamination. Merck voluntarily switched to African green monkey kidneys, believed to be SV40 free, but unfortunately the genie had escaped the flask. By 1963, the U.S. Public Health Service mandated SV40 free certification for future polio batches. Manufacturing protocols shifted, filtration tightened, and official assurances followed. The old doses posed negligible risk. The new ones were clean. Leaflets reassured parents. The press moved on. But no natural serology survey measured how many children carried the virus. The episode settled into archives, a footnote buried beneath triumphant headlines. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be talking more about SV40 in tomorrow's show. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.